Then, for poetry makes nothing happen. See, that is the point. Poetry has no effect on the outside world. People will read good poems, enjoy them, later forget about it. Then, poetry makes nothing happen. Poetry cannot change the course of things. It survives in the valley of its making. That is, the poetry survives in the soul of the person. It gives joy to us. Then, making valley of its making, where executives, admins would never want to tamper, flows on south from ranches of isolation and the busy griefs. Ranches of isolation, isolated nooks and corners of the human psyche. That is, poetry will be reaching every part of your soul. That is, a poem originates from a highly imaginative soul. And so when we read it, our soul, every part of our soul will enjoy the sweetness of the poem. Then it flows, and the busy griefs, root towns that we believe and die in, it survives. A way of happening, a mouth. A mouth refers to a language or a style. A way of happening, the record of possibilities. Our poetry as a voice, a way of expressing human condition. See, human condition is rightly represented through poetry. Actually, the sorrows, the joys, the surprises, the wonders of the poet is given expression in poetry. And when we read it, we also share these joys, sorrows, and dreams. But don't think that poetry can make much changes in the society. But it can make your soul happy. It can make the reader happy. Then, earth receive, and now coming to see, that is the end of section 2. In section 2, actually, you don't see the elegiac elements here. The main point is that he says is that AIDS also is an ordinary person like you and me. He also had his own weaknesses, frailties. He was a great poet. His poetry was excellent, but as a person, he had his own weaknesses and negative points. A very realistic rendering. It is not at all seen usually in elegies. This kind of sincere rendering of facts. And so this makes this poem excellent. And then he says that poetry doesn't make anything happen. You cannot expect that poetry can make changes in the society. See, poetry, it is the oozing of a very imaginative soul. It comes from a highly imaginative soul. And when the reading community, when we read it, our soul also will be enjoying it. We will see that our sorrows and joys are given expression in the poetry. But don't think that it can change the course of the society. Then coming to the last section, you will see the burial of the dead poet. That is now section 3. Earth receive an honored guest. Now earth, it is time for you to receive a very honorable guest. This great man is going to be buried. William Yeats is laid to rest. Now the great man is going to take his eternal rest. He is going to be buried. Let the Irish vessel lie emptied of its poetry. A great compliment is given to Yeats. Auden calls him the Irish vessel, and he says that the Irish vessel is emptied of its poetry. Then, in the nightmare of the dark, See, Nightmare of the Dark, the terrible days preceding the outbreak of World War II in 1939. See, in the Nightmare of the Dark, listen, references to the terrible years preceding the outbreak of World War II in 1939. In the Nightmare of the Dark, see, even though the poet talked about love, tolerance and companionship, the world is preparing for a second world war. All the dogs of Europe bark. The dogs of Europe refers to the selfish, bloodthirsty leaders of Europe like Hitler, Mussolini and so on. See, the dogs of Europe bark. Who are the dogs? Full of contempt for these leaders. Auden was greatly against war. Majority of the writers are against war. He says that even after reading the excellent poems of Yeats, talking about love, tolerance and friendship, the people are preparing for war. They are given leadership by the bloodthirsty leaders like Hitler, Mussolini and so on. And the living nations wait. People are waiting for their orders. Each sequestered meaning separated in its hate, separated and isolated from others because of its own hatred and selfishness. Why we go for war? For our own selfishness. Why the countries go for war? Because of their selfishness. Each sequestered in its hate. Intellectual disgrace, that is people hating each other, stays from every human face. After discussing the lofty ideals presented by writers like W.B. Yeats, again we become selfish and we start hating each other. People hate each other, countries hate each others. And the seas of pity lie locked and frozen in each lie. And the frozen image from the first stanza is carried down. He says that there is no pity or fellow feeling in the eyes of the people. Our people are preparing for a great world war. The reference is to the Second World War. See, even after reading the great poems of writers like W.B. Yeats, see, these poems talk about the need of love, pity, compassion, fellow feeling, etc. We read these poems, we enjoy these poems, we will talk elaborately over these poems, we interpret them in our own way, and then we continue to be selfish and we are preparing ourselves for a war. The only feeling that dominates us is the hatred for the other party. Follow poet, follow right to the bottom of the night. See, to the innermost depths. The poet should do everything possible to explore the hidden truth to the bottom of the night with your unconstraining voice. Still persuade us to rejoice. See, you poets, you have used your poetry, your wisdom to persuade us to rejoice despite the horrors of war looming large in the horizon. See, W.H. Auden says that I am very sad, desperate thinking about the war, the upcoming war. But the great man Yeats had taught me to enjoy even in the midst of our sorrows. The horror of war is looming large in the horizon, but the poetry of Yeats prompts Auden to rejoice even in the midst of these griefs. Make a vineyard of the curse. Turn a curse into a blessing. Make us rejoice despite the curse of war that threatens to destroy humanity. Auden says that even though I am sad, even though I am dejected, for the time being thinking about the upcoming war, I will not be completely disappointed because The poetry of AIDS had taught me how to turn a curse into a blessing, and it has taught me to rejoice despite the curse of war, which is going to destroy the humanity. Even in the midst of all these problems, the poems of AIDS teach me how to rejoice. It teaches me how to make the life in this earth tolerable. In the deserts of the heart, in a rapture of distress, joyfully despite the distress and failures, even though all these negatives are around me, even though people are making preparations for war, even though countries are making preparations for the war, I am happy reading the poems of AIDS. It instills in me an element of hope and optimism. And then, and I feel that, after the war or even after some time, we will be facing a happy world. In this context, we are apt to think, it is very apt to think that, think of the lines of Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, the last line of the poem. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Even though the cold winter is awaiting us, after that there is a hope that a beautiful spring is awaiting us. Such a note of hope is seen in this poem also. He says that now I can see the upcoming war, the preparations made for the war, but the poetry of AIDS makes me optimistic and hopeful. Thinking of a future, a bright future that is awaiting me and the world. In the deserts of the heart, let the healing fountain start. The desert of the heart, dry because there is no sympathy or fellow feeling. Auden says that now the people, their hearts have become like deserts, dry, no feeling, no sympathy, compassion for the fellow human being. But I hope that in the future, people will correct themselves. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? In the prison of his days, that is, man is a prisoner of his own self. Teach the free man how to praise. And see the lines, in the deserts of the heart, he admits that now the hearts of the people are dry. Because it has become dry, it is devoid of sympathy and fellow feeling. Let the healing fountain start, but finally the healing fountain will emerge. In the prison of his days, now the man is a prisoner of his own selfishness. But he will come out of this. And the poetry of AIDS will teach the free man how to praise. Free men from the prison of self. The people, we are prisoners of our own self. And from this prison, we will come out. And the poetry of AIDS will definitely free men from the prison of one's own self and will inspire them to accept and praise their life. That is a very important message. He says that now the hearts of the people are dry, devoid of any feeling of sympathy, fellow feeling. But the situation will change. Poetry, earlier he has said that poetry can make nothing happen. But now he says that the poetry of AIDS will help the man. What has happened to man? A man has become a prisoner. He is in the prison of himself, prison created by himself. And from the prison of self, man will come out. The poetry of AIDS will free men from the prison of self. And then inspire us to accept and praise life. And so now the problem is that everybody, become selfish, devoid of fellow feelings. But Auden is sure that definitely people will shed their selfishness. Reading the poems of W.B. Yeats, people will come out of the prison of their own selves, and then they will learn to accept and praise their life. They will understand the value of life. Now people are selfish, devoid of fellow feeling, making preparations for the war. But Auden hopes that poetry of Yeats will change them drastically. Man will be saved from the prison of his own self, and he will learn to accept and praise their life. And so that is the end of the poem. And so I hope that you have understood the poem, which has elegiac features, not fully an elegy, but it is written in somewhat an elegiac pattern. And it is different from the conventional elegies. And 3 sections are there, and a very realistic rendering of the death of Yeats is given. At the same time, you will understand Auden's great appreciation for the great poet W.B. Yeats, whom he describes as the Irish vessel. I hope you have enjoyed the poem. And so, for the time being, we will conclude. Thank you.